Okay, I welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video show where I interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, we talk to a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest on our show. Today's guest, Harsh, is someone who has always inspired me. We got to recently meet because of an initiative called Pint of View. But a little bit about Harsh before we jump into this conversation. Harsh Snehanshu is a tech entrepreneur and serial community builder. He built YourQuote, India's largest writing platform that is home to over 7 million writers and 200 million posts. He also founded Bookmark, which is a dating app for readers. I've used both these products and I think they're really, really cool. So, apart from startups, he co founded CubbonReads and steered the silent reading movement across the globe with 120 plus chapters in 70 plus cities in 4 continents. Of late, he's busy with scaling his newest community, Pint of View, a viral lecture series movement in bars and pubs across the world. So, Harsh, first of all, thank you for making time for this. I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you so much for having me, for considering me worthy enough for your podcast. Yes.
This is wonderful, Harsh. And I feel like there's so much to unpack in your journey. So, let's just get started with the beginnings or the roots. Tell me about your years growing up in Dhanbad. What was Harsh like as a student at school? And what were you curious about outside school? Let's just get started there.
Yeah, so I have had a scattered childhood because my father was in State Bank of India, so every 3 years we would move around. Dhanbad is where we settled. But I spent my childhood across 7 cities in Bihar and Jharkhand mostly. And when I was in eighth class, my father landed in Dhanbad and he was the branch manager of ISM campus branch, ISM Indian School of Mines, which has now morphed into IIT Dhanbad. And I remember in eighth class, my father would call, "Hey, come to office because new batch of entrants have come. They are opening their accounts." So all these IT grads who would have cracked IT at 2,500 plus ranks would come to ISM Dhanbad and they would take mining engineering, petroleum engineering. So from eighth class, I was sort of hammered into that. Take advice from this bhaiya, that didi. That what book they started to get into IIT. So being in a city, especially a small town which has an IIT or an IIT uh, in it, sort of, it is so much in the folklore because the school is entirely about this year we had 5 IITians, best rank was this. So every single thing was sort of shaping you or pushing you towards IIT. But when I was growing up across 5 different cities, including Patna, Hazaribagh, which is a hill station in Jharkhand, and also Jhumri Tilaiya, by the way. I was there for a brief 1 year. Uh, so across those cities, I was only interested in one subject. I would score 100 out of 100 in general knowledge, GK, and every other subject I was really poor. But what happened in the 8th, 9th class when I reached Dhanbad and when science bifurcated into physics, chemistry, maths, sorry, physics, chemistry, biology, then suddenly it felt like that everything is general knowledge at the core of it. If you think of physics, I studied it as a GK because tomorrow, if there is a quiz which asks who invented, say, electromagnetism, who discovered it, Michael Faraday, is the answer. So that's a quiz question, but that's also a physics question. So other than math, everything, and even math has stories like who discovered arithmetic progression. There's a mathematician and scientist by the name C.F. Gauss who discovered it, and that too in school because his teacher asked him to do a sum of 1 to 100 to just shush him up. And he just 1 plus 2 plus until 100. And each there was 100 plus 99 plus until 1. And then when you sum it, 101 into 100 is equal to twice that amount. So that's what arithmetic progression essentially is. That n into n plus 1 by 2, that bit. So everything was sort of in uh, a story which aided to my general knowledge. And that sort of subtle shift happened in ninth class. when I started enjoying every subject. And I remember I realized early on, 8th, 9th, that my maths was quite good. So I really wanted to become an engineer. But I also loved biology and I didn't want to take up biology. So in 9th, 10th class, I studied the biology books of 11th, 12th, fearing that I'll leave out on the bio. And during that time, all these IIT bhaiya and didis would give me their second-hand books if they had gotten in. Because a lot of these people who come to IIT Dhanbad, they come with their preparation material as well because they want to prepare and get a better rank and sort of move to IIT Bombay or Delhi or Kharagpur or Kanpur. So they're not happy with their rank. They're not happy with their. So a bunch of them reappear and they get a better rank, much like in IAS officers. IPS officers reappear and then they become IAS and so on. So I got a lot of second-hand books from them in 9th class. So I remember learning about logarithm or trigonometry of 11, 12 in 9, 10th itself. And it was so fascinating because the whole summer vacation, I would be solving 11, 12th class chemistry books. So that's the kind of geeky, but totally curiosity led. Otherwise, I would not have studied biology, for example. It was just out of passion. I wanted to know more. And finally, right now, when I'm sort of building a lecture community, it feels like going back to the same era when I was interested in everything. Yesterday, we had a neuroscience lecture, and I remembered the early days when I read about the brain in NCRT 11th, 12th books in 9th class when I was just reading it like a novel page, cover to cover. So that's how my beginning has happened. That it's a very curious, big childhood, but I was always scared of all the subjects except for GK because the inherent quiz master within me sort of loves that, and and everything became quiz worthy. I remember when I was preparing for JEE also, every time I would solve a problem in my home, next day I'll come and quiz my friends. If they answered, I would remember the solution because I couldn't solve it at home and they were able to. So it was competition in that sense. This guy is better than me. I was slightly jealous. So that would be a great revision. And if they did not, then I would teach them the answer. And that sort of made me revise it again. So everything I studied automatically got revised because I was this so called quiz master in my school days, always quizzing my friends of simple, innocuous, and sometimes difficult and complicated physics question, chemistry questions. So that interchange has always been on, and that has been a part of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I see all the books behind you, and when you mentioned this idea of GK being sort of a core, integrating sort of idea for all these subjects, I
Yeah,
think you were quite precautious as a young person in terms of how you generally looked at the world. But I remember us briefly speaking about your parents' influence. If you could tell me a
yeah,
little more about that, Harshan, like
yeah,
your mom and your dad, like what were their individual sort of influences on you growing up at that young age?
yeah. So my father, even though he's a banker, he's an artist at heart. Uh, he paints, he sings, he plays all the instruments, he sculpts, and it has not been like a passive hobby. It has been a very, very active part of our growing up years because every single day, late at night, my father would come back from bank at around 8, 8:39. He would have chai and then have dinner. And from 10:30 till 12 would be his alone time in the studio. He would be painting something. And early in the morning, we would wake up to him singing on the harmonium. So that's the kind of, and he has always been anti-job himself as an artist. He was like, "Beta, kabhi bank ki naukri mat karna. It is soulless. It will not fulfill your soul." So in a way, it was his rebellion coming back home and doing so much, and that sort of became a part of it. So I'm in a job right now, but my weekends are for myself, and I love building communities. I love playing instruments, so I make sure I don't miss out. I love reading, so all the communities you see is around something which is soul serving, I would say, um, something that adds meaning. Even bookmark dating apps are like so face oriented. We just hit blurred all the faces that talk with context, with meaning around books or maybe around your interest first, and then have the face reveal. So all the products has that. I think that my father's sort of ethos, that do things for yourself,
Hmm.
otherwise you will feel lost in the world. And my
Yeah.
father kept doing that. On the other hand, whereas my father is an artist, and in the truest and purest fashion, he has never commercialized his art. He never really, whenever a friend would come and they would be like, "This is so good. I wish I had this at my place." My father would just give away, and we would be protesting, "Hey, it was my favorite painting. Why would?" And my father would be like, "I would make it again." But that's the kind of confidence, the creative confidence he was there. That was there. I remember once I really liked a sculpture of Ganeshji in a mela that I saw, and my father was not there, but my aunt was there, so she bought it. But that was the only piece, and I felt really sad that my aunt will take it to with her to Delhi. And I went back to my father and I'm like, that was just one piece. I wish I we had spotted it first and took it. And then my father was like, what is that piece? Can you show me? Then I went to my aunt who was at our place, took that piece out and showed it to my father. And then he did something very heroic, which is still imprinted in my memory. He took his scooter, Bajaj Priya at that time. He sat me down behind him and we went to a hardware shop and he's like, 1 kilo putti dena. And then we came back with putti, that is clay. And he sculpted the same replica right then and there. So that was like his confidence that I so what, you couldn't afford it or you couldn't get it when you have an artist. So I remember in sixth class when we first heard about Leonardo da Vinci, that there was the genius who was doing so many things. He was a scientist, he was an ornithologist, he was also a painter, sculptor. He designed the parachute, Vitruvian Man, everything. People went crazy that one man, how can one man do so many things? It did not surprise me because I was living with such a man in my household because Vinci, my father was no less than Vinci and has been like that. On the other hand, my mother has been a real enterprising woman. She has been a thorough academic. She was a master's in economics. And after her marriage, she totally became a housewife. But the itch to go back to studies never really left her. And the time when I was preparing for JEE, she would sit long nights with me preparing for NET. So while I cracked JEE, my mother cracked NET. And then when I did my BTech, my mother did her PhD. And she became a professor after I went to college. And she had a very fulfilling 15 years of career at the latter half of her life. And that really sort of, so she is an academic and very, very tech savvy. So even after her retirement, she has a Instagram page called Concepts in a Minute. She does 1 minute reels on all the topics every single day, not missed a day. She has a YouTube channel with thousands of subscribers. So she is very, very tech savvy and very, very enterprising. So I think it's my father's creativity and passion for all things for soul with my mother enterprise that they both came together. And also my father's laziness and my mother's temperament. And my mother is very aggressive when it comes to doing things. She does not uh, bog down. She is very driven. So that those vices and virtues both came in me, and I think that's what I have inherited from them. And it's a crazy combination because when you merge creativity with an enterprise, it sort of is magical. It's very so that has given me the sort of fearlessness and unstoppability. When I think of any community, I don't think of that community itself. I don't think of the city itself. I think of the world. So when I'm thinking of, say, cycling community, I'll be thinking that how this can be scaled up in India. When I'm thinking of making people write, I'm not thinking of Indian writers. It's entire globe. How can I rally it? With YourQuote, we started doing open mics, like how TED does TEDx, which is more like community run lectures. YourQuote pioneered YourQuote open mics. We did it in 130 cities across 930 open mics across the world. We did it in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore as well. And we took it to Samastipur in Bihar as well. So that's the kind of range. First open mics in a lot of those cities. And that access, when we open an access, we want to do it for everyone. And some communities are very democratic in that sense. Some communities where we want to filter the crowd and make it curated, those are more, I would say, capitalistic in nature. They are priced at a high price point. Yeah.
No, I see, like, now that I see all your entrepreneurial pursuits, Harsh, I see that core connection with how you were also brought up with those,
Yeah.
core values. And I see that influence of both your mom and your dad. And I know a lot
Yeah.
of people, and I've heard a couple of interviews where you've spoken about, your entrepreneurial journey. But I feel like this subconscious sort of influence of two adults that you grow up looking at every single day for such a long time, I think it really has such a long-term impact in how you look at the
Yeah.
world. Because, I mean, in whatever little I've come to know you, your way of looking at problems, ideas is very uncommon. And it's not something I've noticed in a lot of people. And I was always curious about where the seeds of this sort of thinking came from. Like now, in your high school years, you started preparing for one of the most competitive exams in the world, the IITJEE, which is has less than a 1 or 2% clearance sort of rate in terms of like the competitive nature of that exam. But what was that experience like for you? Did it shape or change your perception of the subject? And then maybe you can tell me about what IIT you got into and your years in IIT as well.
Yeah.
So let's start off
So
with IITJ prep in those years.
yeah, I think I hacked the system in a very smart but simple way. I think in terms of number of hours put in, a lot of people say you have to study 16 hours a day, 15 hours a day. I think that's more like donkey work. I probably studied 2 hours a day. I was an active gamer. I was playing FIFA, Spider-Man, all those on my newly bought computer at that time. Internet was not there, but gaming was there. Um, and I was also playing cricket every evening with my friends, football or cricket or something like that. So uh, that was possible because of that daily revision thing, which I unconsciously unlocked. So I only realized later on that whatever I would learn in this tuition, I would sit with my for the 2 years. My seatmate in school was the biology topper, and I loved sitting with him because he would be telling me little bits of biology, and he was also a very good pianist and table drummer. So we were also jamming all the time. Every time in between period, we will be just singing and playing dholak on the table, and the exchange of information was so good. I would be telling him a little bit of about maths. He would be telling me. And by the way, that guy, his name is Ankit Ranjan. He went to become a doctor at Grant Medical College, and then he taught PGIMS. He was All India Rank 1 PGI, which has only 2 seats. He was All India Rank 1. So that his, what do I say? I mean, he was so dedicated, smart, but at the same time, very chill. So that whole idea about hustle, I have not found. I've somehow always ended up being around really smart people who would work hard. But I think smartness or smart work would be much more. Because I remember daily we would be discussing some study material or the other, but it was not in the syllabus. I was speaking about his biology, which has nothing to do. I was talking about Brief History of Time, which I was reading that time to him, about black holes. And then we would also be discussing Kasauti Zindagi Ki and Kahani Ghar Ghar Ki during that time, because my parents would be watching that every single day. And Kal ye hua, Komolika ne ye kiya. So that gossip would also be there. So it was a very, very chill kind of a setup. And somehow I've always found friends who are too much like my guilty pleasure in the current days is Fabulous Lives of Bollywood Wives, Love is Blind. I liked Love is Blind so much that I adapted that into a feature of Bookmark, Face Reveal. It's directly lifted from Netflix, Love is Blind. It's not my original idea, but it's productized. So I think that calibration is very important. You cannot just be reading deep shit. You have to know what is on the ground to also later on develop the critical thinking. This is massy, this is kitsch, and then this is literary, this is nuanced. So that both aspect needs to be sorted. So I think in terms of the people I made friends with, even now I hang out with, I sadly, most of my school friends are too corporate for my taste. So I have my own sets of friends who are doing something which is very niche, something very different. And that's the tribe. And I think with Point of View, that's the tribe I want to make a community of. That how do you meet a NASA space scientist or a neuroscientist if you come from a tech background? You don't, unless you probably match with them on a dating website or otherwise. But here, it's a curated set of neuroscience lecture. Neuroscience enthusiasts will come. They might not be from the same background. Yesterday, for example, we had a neuroscience lecture. So many accountants and finance professionals turned up, venture capitalists turned up, because the curiosity about our brain is common. It's again general knowledge. It adds on to our general knowledge. So that curious bent is what is incisive. And when you are also discussing pop culture, you're criticizing it as well. So critical thinking becomes a part and parcel of your life. And yeah, so coming back to your question, which is more like, how did I prepare for JE? I had a lot of everything I would learn. I would quiz my friends next day. If they answered, I would remember because they knew it. If they didn't answer, I would tell them, and teaching is the best way to learn. So I would remember. So everything sort of got into my memory, and it never left because I helped build those neurons and those connections over and over again by asking my friends. And that sort of has become my go to when I get a business idea, when I get a story idea to write. My first job becomes of tossing that idea to a gamut of people, around 30 odd people, 50 odd people, and let them criticize so that all the loopholes and plot holes of that idea gets sort of buried or solved. And then it's chiseled final product, which is worthy of execution. And by doing that over and over again for 30 odd years, since I started getting ideas, I'm 36 now. Uh, so what has done, it has developed an intuition inherently that this is good shit, this is bad shit. It has, so when I see a copy, when I see a line, I'm naturally very critical. Either it's bad or good, and I can very quickly point out what is bad with it, why this does not work. So that clarity of thought has come because of constant bouncing of idea and being criticized and being secure enough to take that criticism to chisel that idea better. And that's how I operate. When I get a new idea, ye karte na, and then I have a bunch of friends who are devil's advocate to play that role, and they're like, "Yeah, isliye nahi kaam karega, isliye nahi kaam karega." Then I come back with how do I tackle that bottleneck and that bottleneck, and slowly it sort of exercises itself. So it has become a part and parcel. So that's how I prepared for IIT. And once I went to IIT, it was a very, very disappointing experience. I had better teachers in my life in plus two than in IIT. I think IITs, they hire professors because of their research. They might be very good researchers. PhD is also about research, the mandate to become a professor. But they don't really talk about how good a lecturer they are, how engaging they are as speakers. Most of them are not. And especially in the first year, you get the worst of the professors. 70% of the IIT professors, they might be very good researchers, but they are very sucky teachers because they are too technical. So the lectures are no more fun. It becomes either. So my biggest disappointment was physics for me until 12th class was visual. The moment I got into IIT, physics became maths, entirely maths. And that's also advanced physics is maths. But the visual element totally went for a toss. If you have done sciences till you're plus two, there was a beautiful book called Resnick Halliday, which would begin with trivia like a cat is following. And if a cat falls from third floor, more likely to get hurt versus a cat falling from 100th floor because there's a drag force that comes. The air friction sort of makes it terminal velocity is the word. So when they fall, the force which is of friction and the gravity balance, and they are not really accelerating when they're falling from a 100th floor, but from a third floor they are accelerating. So when they impact, there's likelihood that they will get hurt. So
Hmm.
things like that trivia was there peppered in. And I would be so fascinated. Like if you go at a speed on a roller coaster at a particular speed, then you will fly off. So what is that optimum speed you can just stick? So it would begin with such visual cues, and then the chapter would answer it. Even H.C. Verma, it had two monkeys pulling a rod, something like that. But then when you go to college, everything is maths. And the teachers who are doing maths are not making you visualize it.
Hmm.
And you are suddenly discovering a bigger city, new friends, freedom, internet, movies on the LAN, and also girlfriends. So suddenly there is so much distraction with bad teacher, you lose interest.
Hmm.
And that sort of very few people retain that kind of interest which we have. And for 4 years, I just waded through my college. Uh, really enjoyed just 3, 4 good professors who were there. And the whole revision aspect went for a toss because um, I think it was so much of math I wouldn't want to pursue it going back home. It was not visual for me, and that's when I discovered writing. I started blogging on campus, and I my first blog was more about documenting the IIT experience for my friends back home who were dropping a year. That this is how IIT looks like, and that's how I started writing. And nobody would read my blog because it slowly moved to becoming this pretentious philosopher musings about how we should respect our country, how we should very, very ideal kind of blog, which nobody read. And then I sort of read Chetan Bhagat and then a couple of other rom-com of that time. There was a senior who wrote a book called Anything for You Man. It
Hmm.
was by Tushar Raheja. Very simple, but at that time it was a very engrossing book for me because I was falling in love with somebody and it was about first love, that teenage novel, pop novel, very, it's also called chicklit or ladlet.
Hmm.
Um, so when I was reading those books, I was like, I can write better than them. That's how most of the people who start in college, start writing novels in college, start. That you read Chetan Bhagat, you're like, you write better than them. And then you realize that Chetan Bhagat still is better than you because he has the narrative in place right from beginning till end. His
Hmm.
language might be very, very average. And it's so difficult to hold that plot
Yep.
throughout. If you've read Chetan Bhagat, especially for, I love 5 Point Someone, I'm very openly um, appreciative about it. I think where Chetan Bhagat really faltered is he did not grow from his first book to later books.
Hmm.
He remained stuck because he unlocked a market. He thought this is where the money is. So he himself did not read much. This is what I believe because his writing has not evolved. I see my writing after reading Chetan Bhagat, it was very basic. But I kept
Hmm.
on reading, I improved, I became a better writer.
Yep.
And so Chetan Bhagat is not a writer in my head. He's more of a businessman because
Yep.
he's sticking to that market. Durjoy Datta, same, sticking to the market. I know Durjoy can write better, but it's a market which is ready to lamp his books. So he's still writing those love stories, even
Hmm.
though he's reading better books, but the market has, and I think it's the peril of being a full time writer. I was a full time writer after college because I wrote a book on my blog and it was called very cutely, it was called Oops, an Erroneous Love Story.
Hmm.
And it became viral on campus. And then I reached out to a publisher, the same publisher which published all these writers like Durjoy, Ravinder Singh, Shrishti. And Shrishti readily published me, and they just had one caveat that you have to turn your book into a 19 character. So if you notice all the Shrishti titles, they had this superstition of numerology that
Hmm.
if my books have 19 characters, they become a bestseller. So if you notice, I too had a love story. Ravinder Singh's book, it had two dot after it, just to make it's
Oh.
grammatically inconsistent. Of course, I love you. The Shrishti version was had two dot and an exclamation mark to
Hmm.
fit the 11. Life is what you make of it by Preeti Shenoy, 19 characters. So my concise oops and erroneous love story was turned into a cheesy oops, I fell in love with needless exclamation around I just to fit that 19-hour bill. But the book became a bestseller. It ended up selling around 50,000 odd copies. So in
Wow.
my third year, I was making 3, 4 lakhs a year. as royalty. I financed my whole education. I had a
Wow.
girlfriend at that time. I gifted her fancy watches and whatnot. So it was a very, very royal kind of a life in college because I was the only one who was making money in college. And then after IIT, I was like, 3 lakhs is enough money because I did not have to pay rent. My college fees was barely 35,000 per semester, 70,000 per year, which was nothing. And SBI had this provision. The State Bank of India kids they'll get 50,000 as a scholarship per year who get into IIT. So that fees was financed by the bank and all that 3 lakh was my own. So but I did not waste it, but just gifted my girlfriend a lot of hi-fi stuff at that time.
But in terms
So
of the field, Harsh, like what field were you specializing in IIT
yeah,
at
I
that?
took engineering physics. So physics was so visual. I was so much in love with it. I wanted to be a physicist. I wanted to become a scientist. I have while my preparation, my father did a wonderful thing. He surrounded me with a lot of books. So I have read biographies of around 700 odd scientists, tiny biographies. Like if I'm reading Enrico Fermi during electricity chapter, or Michael Faraday during electromagnetism, or say Albert Einstein during Brownian motion or photoelectric effect, or relativity, or any of the scientists you say, like Heisenberg for Heisenberg uncertainty principle, John Dalton for atomic theory. My father would get a biography of John Dalton. So I got really interested in the stories of these people.
Hmm.
So once I graduated from scientist, I went into saints. I had a whole uh, love affair with saints. Started with Swami Vivekananda's biography, then read all the Yogoda Satsang की जितनी किताबें हैं उस समय. Yogoda नहीं, Yogoda is Paramahansa Yogananda's. This
Hmm.
Ramakrishna Mission has a publication, na? So
Yes.
Ramakrishna Gospels with Ramakrishna वो सब पढ़ गया. And then I read this book, Autobiography of a Yogi, in my 11th grade.
Hmm.
And for a short 1 year, 1 month, I renounced everything. I stopped studying. I was like, everything is mithya, the only truth in life. I was so impressionable. And I still believe that, by the way, that the only goal in life is to attain moksha. But
Hmm.
not in the Hindu Sanatani Dharma. I like more of Buddhism because I find it more scientific.
Hmm.
But yeah, so moksha or nirvana, whatever, the freedom from cycle of life and death. That's the goal of everything. Is material world is a lie. So that's what the book said. And I was so insistent on just leaving my home for the Himalayas because the book said that when you are ready, the guru comes to you. So I'm like, I have to tell the universe that I'm ready to renounce everything. And then my father got so panicked. He spoke with all the teachers that my son has sort of become this demented chap. He wants to leave everything and become a yogi. So teachers started making fun of me in school. They were like, "What am I hearing? You're leaving everything. Kab ja rahe ho? Jaldi niklo." Something like that. And my mother got scared. She hid the book. She put it in the bank's locker. I'd read half of it. She's like, if he reads the pura, he'll just run away. And apparently they had a story. Some saint came walking in and they were like, "Ye aapka bachcha ya to uh, he will become the prime minister or something like that, or a saint." So I'm like, I'm okay with either though. so so yeah, that saint thing, my mother got worried. This is the moment he'll just leave house. And it was a very, very impressionable. It was so my father ultimately got home a spiritualist who I admired because he would talk about all these things like samadhi mein 4 ghanta samadhi mein aaj baithe and all that. And he comes to my home and he asked me a question that what am I hearing? What do you want to do? I'm like, I want to renounce everything. This furniture, this bed, this car. And he's like, these are not your things. These are your father's things. These are your mother's things.
Hmm.
What do you own that you want to renounce? And I could not come up with anything. I had no money.
Hmm.
So he's like, it's very easy to renounce when you have nothing in hand. But once you acquire, and then if you can renounce, that's what a true yogi does. And
Hmm.
funnily, unconsciously, I got into IIT, I renounced studying. I fell in love with physics. I just broke away with it and went into writing. I built YourQuote 7 years. Now YourQuote is run by a teammate, and I'm sort of renounced but retired, you can say. Everything I CubbonReads scaled up. Now resident curators run it. I've not visited CubbonReads in 3 months, but I do go through all the caption. So the writing bit, documentation bit, I'm still involved, but the in-person presence, because of my job, because I have a working Saturday, I'm not able to. So these are the things which unconsciously end up happening. So I hope someday I've acquired enough to renounce everything and sort of just disappear into the forest. I don't know. That's still a dream somewhere. It's a childhood dream. So
Yeah.
it has never gone. It has not gone away.
No, and I feel like the fact that you're so honest with your curiosity, Harsh, I think that's a very important sort of trait, in people that I've noticed that have done relatively well. I feel like just the fact that you're not afraid to challenge both your accepted sort of understanding of science or religion. You're always open to, these alternate perspectives. I feel like that is quite commendable, especially at such a young age, and it can be quite scary at that age too, because, you have this
Yeah,
completely rational scientific way of looking, and then, the spiritual and religious sort of view sort of, intermeshes with that, and you're trying to make sense of
yeah.
the world. But I think at the core of those sort of curiosities was this, would you say it was a core need to sort of understand the world, understand how humans relate to each other? Would that be fair to
Maybe
say?
because I've grown up. I've been surrounded by books.
Yeah.
It started with Children's Knowledge Bank. There was a series in Hindi. It used to come. So I began my childhood. Then I got a globe in second class. I memorized the entire globe. So I
Yeah.
would have this birthday game where people will come and they say a country like Nauru, Tahiti, and I would exactly know where it is on the globe. So
Hmm.
country's capital. So curiosity and learning has been very enmeshed in my growing up years. And I think in sixth class, I learned that science mandates you to have a proof before believing.
Hmm.
So I started quizzing my parents, my dadi, my mummy about, have you seen God? And they did not have a satisfying answer. So I said, I'm an atheist. If I if you prove that God exists, I will become a believer. But until I get the proof, and then I did something very blasphemous. I come from religious family. My mother is a devout religious person. She prays for 3 hours even now every single day. My father is more of a artist. His way of praying is doing his art, and he's very detached that way, and that allowed me to operate with an. I've been a very very openly atheistic person,
Hmm.
and but not. I will not fight another person. I understand why religion is necessary, and I think nothing explained it better than the movie Life of Pi or the book as well.
Yep.
That the reality of life is so starkly miserable that religion gives you hope to live another day.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you need a lot of confidence without religion to just carry on with living another day.
Hmm.
And I believe because I did not subscribe to religion as a crutch, I had no other choice other than building that confidence myself. So I
Yep.
operate with that confidence that it's ultimately about faith, religion. So that sort of, so my religion is having that faith in myself. If I dream of something, I'll be able to achieve it, and no power in the universe can stop me. That's, you can say manifestation, you can say confidence, you can say good self-esteem, whatever. If you put it in Maslow, it will be self-esteem. If you put it on religion parameter, it will be about if you think like Rhonda Byrne, it will be like secret, law of attraction, all that. But ultimately, it's about faith in just the purity of your desire. Like if something comes from within me, I know it is going to work. It will take
Hmm.
its own journey. It will have its own struggle. But it is like I know for this fact, I can say it on podcast, which can become a prophecy, that I know Bookmark is going to become really, really massive. It's going to be my largest product out there in life. And
Hmm.
this is going to happen within a couple of years without me spending money. Because I just launched a feature on Bookmark which is just waiting to be discovered. It's an anonymous letter feed. You write a letter without your name, and people can send a like. And when they send a like, you see their profiles, but they don't see who they sent a like. They can just filter by gender.
Hmm.
And it's like going further beyond. Earlier, Bookmark had prompts which you would respond to. So you were basically answering what we wanted you to answer. But letter is you. Letter is what you want to put out. Some
Yeah.
people are liking. So basically, we are making every user sort of put out a part of their heart on paper.
Yep.
And it's so earnest. It's just a matter of time the world discovers it. And the letter is a paid feature. Every letter you need to pay 19 rupees to write. So it will become
Hmm.
super profitable. It will become super viral. It's just a matter of time. I just know it. And give it a couple of years, I would love to come back to this video and say that, look, I knew it. And because this has come from the purity of it is so innate
Yeah.
that I know it is going to work. Like same thing for CubbonReads. When it started, I told Shruti, my partner, that look look at it. Within 3 months, will become media's baby. Every and we got covered not only by Indian media, we were also featured in New York Times. So it manifested. But I knew because the value of what we were doing with CubbonReads, for example, the turning of a public space into a place.
Yep.
It's a that journey, and that's the same thing we are doing with bars now. But bar idea is not mine. It's totally inspired by lectures on that kind of science. These are people who do it. But the passion for turning urban spaces into intellectual spaces is very, very self-serving in its nature, because I'm basically building a community for me. And I know if I'm solving for myself, there will be at least 1 million people like me who are
Yep.
geeky, curious enough in the purest form. They are not utilitarian with their. I think anybody who reads fiction, especially literary fiction, knows life. They understand life because they are not utilitarian in their approach.
Hmm.
Literary fiction does not give you anything. It does not give you answers. It leaves you with questions. When I read Kafka's Metamorphosis, I was disturbed because I was a full-time writer at that time. I did not have a job. I felt like that beetle with his legs up on the bed, feeding off my parents, and it filled me with so much of frustration and guilt. But at the same time, as an artist, I felt I'm doing right for my heart. This is what my heart wants to do. I truly
Hmm.
identify only as a writer, nothing else. Even now, I'm a writer. That's the only skill I have. But with writing, I think everything is writing. Community building is writing. Joke writing is writing. Videos is writing. Everything's DNA is writing. Music is also writing at the core of it. So I think I'm serving the purest of the form. That's what I say to make myself feel about. But I had a friend who said the same thing about dance, and I could see why. Because dance is like you have just let your body free. You're just letting it. Dance connects you to something higher,
Hmm.
and you're just connected with that. With those whirling dervishes in Rumi ke time ke jo Sufi saints, they keep on dancing. It's somewhere. I think all of the art form and even all the sciences, the pure sciences, pure arts, they're all, I think, part of the same universe. It's like left brain, right brain, part of the same brain. It's almost like that.
For
I
sure. And
digressed.
no,
Yeah,
I
I
think
digressed a lot.
this is exactly what we want, Harsh, because I think if you look at the nature of your projects, right, they're in such interesting, parallel, but also diverse sort of spaces. I think that's how your mind sort of works. And I think it's important for the listener to also get a glimpse of how you think about, you know,
Yeah,
subjects you're curious about, the world, and how you engage with it. And that's, I feel, like the direction we want to go in. But before you jumped into your journey with YourQuote, you had this period in the middle after IIT Delhi where you pursued this program called the Young India Fellowship, and you also had this extended period of being a full-time writer where you worked with a bunch of publications. Can you tell us a little bit about that time in your life, Harsh, before we go into
yeah. So
maybe the YourQuote sort of part?
yeah, I think between both these things, I think my writing journey or YourQuote. And IIT, there was 1 year when I just took a year off. It was a gap year when I traveled around the country. And that happened by chance. I started up a company in my third year of college. And just to give you a glimpse, I went to IIT Delhi in 2007 to 11. That was the time when Dipinder Goyal just graduated from IIT Delhi. 7 he graduated. He joined Bain. He started a company called Foodie Bay, and Foodie Bay would keep on reaching out to campus interns. So a lot of my batchmates were coding for Foodie Bay, which later on became Zomato. And Flipkart just started. 2007 was when Flipkart started. So I was in the campus when two revolutions were happening. One was startup, biggest names in current startup world, Flipkart and Zomato, they were coming up. And on the other hand, there was an IIT alumnus who was India's largest selling author, Chetan Bhagat. So publishing and startup. And I was in the campus doing both. So it was but natural for me to merge the two and build a writing sort of platform. But it did not come naturally. It came from a very, very different angle. So I wrote that blog, which got published. I started making money. I wrote a trilogy out of it because the story was incomplete. I left it open ended. There was a lot of reader demand that complete the story. Then I started writing the sequel. I thought I'll end it. The sequel kept getting long. So I ended the sequel again open ended. And the third, I hurriedly ended it. It was not like a very thought through end, but it had some plot holes also. I was 17, 18, 19, but it had an entertaining kind of an end. So that whole comedy of errors sort of culminated into a 3-part series. So when this happened, I was already making some 3-4 lakhs a year. And in campus, you think that's a lot of money because that's entirely your savings. You don't have to pay for electricity, food, anything. The fees has covered it. And also ITs were subsidized that time. I think now the fees is much higher because number of seats have gone up. There are more quotas. So we also got individual rooms very quickly now. I think every person has to be crammed into, 3 people are crammed into one room or so. We had our own rooms. So coming back to, so after that thing happened, I started writing. My book got published. That time, Chicken Soup for the Soul had come to India and they were doing Indian Soul series. And I contributed around 10 stories to it. So much I contributed that in the last book, they also put my name on the cover, amongst other celebs, including Sushmita Sen was also contributing. So I was like, my name is there with Sushmita Sen on the cover of the book. Yeah. And so that was happening. So being the enterprising person, thanks to my mom that I have been, I was like, I made money from my book. I made money from my short story. They would pay 1,000 rupees per story. But for a student, 1,000 is also huge. So I was like, how can I make money from my one-liner? I'm writing every day on Facebook, these one-liners which people are liking. And very lame one-liners also, like, a chappal a day keeps everyone away, rather than an apple a day. Or some philosophical ones like, friends can wait, dreams can't. These two-liner, one-liner I would write. And I would be like, 300 people like me, like my post, those one-liners. Every day I would come up with something or the other. And I was like to mil raha hai, gratification mil raha hai, but I also want to monetize it and I also want credit for it. And that led me to start this thing called WittyShit.com, which was like all the witty one-liners, you put it on a portal and we would turn it into a merchandise, which was a very bad business idea because it's cost intensive. But there was a company at that time called Inkfruit, Bombay based. Inkfruit used to crowdsource designs and print it on t-shirts and sell it and give royalty from sales. So when we thought of monetizing uh, creativity, we thought of merchandise, which is not a scalable way of thinking. Now I would never do that. But we ended up doing that because my co-founder at that time used to sell t-shirts in colleges. There is always that enterprising guy who brings t-shirts in colleges. So my co-founder was that person. So he onboarded, we printed around 1,000 odd t-shirts, spending 2 lakh rupees. One from my pocket, he borrowed from his parents and put that money in. And ultimately, that entire t-shirt remained a dead stock. We could not sell it. I mean, product was easy to build, we thought we'll put a stall in Rendezvous. We put up a stall in Rendezvous, paid 15,000 to Rendezvous, which is the fest of IIT Delhi. But we also put, also this is another learning, we also put custom printing, that we had a screen printing there. We got it rented, that we can click your photo and within 20 minutes you get a t-shirt with your photo on it. So everybody opted for that. So that sort of recovered some of our costs, but the dead stock of 1,000 odd t-shirts with 10 odd one-liners in it, design, remained with us, and we kept on carrying it wherever we went. And that stigma of that load of lost money, we could never recover from that. And then there was some fights also happening between us. So I exited the venture in 12th. And when that exit happened, I went back home and my parents were like, now get into job. All your friends are now in a job. They will become senior. If you join 1 year later, this is the time. Reach out to your alumni and all that. And I had just seen this movie called Into the Wild, and it blew my mind. I was like, college ke baad, college is a cocoon. You don't know anything about the world when you're in college. So I was like, I want to know my country because I want to be a writer. And I cannot be writing this chick flick or campus novels for life. I want to write about India. I want to write about my father. I want to write about growing up. I want to write about so many things. And what I have realized is all these people who I had started reading by that time, most of the great books, read Midnight Children, read Fine Balance, read any of the great books, God of Small Things. It talks about the central characters growing up years, but it is also a commentary on India. It's a larger metaphor on India. And all the great books do that. Jeet Thayil's recent book, Narcopolis, it's as much as a story of the character as much as it is about Bombay and how Bombay changed when the drug changed from opium to heroin. That deterioration is also a metaphor of how Bombay deteriorated with North Indians coming in. So that sort of tells you a lot about so that's the kind of writing I wanted to do. That if I'm writing something, it has to have a macrocosm as well, not just the microcosm of the campus. Or so if I'm talking about, say, a beggar, the earlier version of me would only talk about their story. Even the traveler version of me, when I went around the country, uh, my lens was very monochromatic. Every was Since I had grown up reading biographies and then all these light fiction, my idea was this is this character's story. So if somebody is a beggar, I would think about this is a beggar. He must have been born पैसे नहीं होंगे, and then he would have remained a beggar for life. I would never think beyond that beggar as a person.
Hmm.
I but and that therefore, even while travel, most of my travel stories and notes, they're all about romanticizing that character rather than talking about the larger picture, which I discovered in books much later. And during that time, one good thing happened because of that is that I realized this because the books I was reading at that time, I read Midnight Children during my travel. I read Maximum City by Suketu Mehta during my travel. And I sort of realized that these guys are not just talking about Bombay in Maximum City, but they are also talking about India in a lot of ways. They're also talking about the socio-economic landscape, the political landscape. It's so layered. It's not just this happened, which is what most of my writing at that time was, very plot driven. And the second part was also language. I mean, the kind of language Salman Rushdie uses. I mean, it was so rich. I remember every time I would stop a book, halt at a book, halt at a page, I would end up going back and writing a short story because that immersion of 2 pages of Rushdie's words, which are so rich that it makes you want to write again. I want to write like him. And then you try to write like him. And that's how the whole influence goes like. So during that time, I realized that I don't have the lenses to see India in the way these great writers do. So what do I need to do? What am I missing? I realize I miss arts cast education. I have never really educated. I've not been educated in the arts. I've been educated in the hard sciences. And how do I go back to arts? So one idea was do a master's in English literature after BTech, but I did not want to because most of my friends who were English literature grad, They were great critics, but very, very underconfident writers. And that's where I excelled because I was ignorant. I did not know what good writing means. So I thought I could write and I could finish a book. But all my friends who did literature, they were mostly like, I can never write as great, as nice as Jane Austen or maybe James Joyce or Orwell. So that hangover, which happens when you study literature and you're also reading criticism, I was away. I was saved from that. So I was like, I don't want to do that. I would rather want to do something which allows me to study all the arts in a crash course kind of a fashion. And that's where Young India Fellowship really fitted the bill. And I'm very thankful for my age because that's that time the program that had just started. They were giving full scholarship. I would not have been able to afford it because I had no money. All my savings was spent in those t-shirts. And yeah, so I went to the fellowship after my travel, and now it also gave me the eyes to relook at my stories of travel. So now when I think, I realize a lot of little things. And one key thing about my travel which I forgot to mention is that I had no money after my start. I had 14,000 rupees left in the bank from the royalties, and royalties had also plummeted over time. The first book sold really well, but then second, third book, they did not really sell very well. So I was getting around 1 lakh rupees kind of royalty in a year, which was decent if it is a surplus income, but for survival money, it's not enough. So I was left with 14,000 odd. And then when we went full time with the startup, also there was rent. 25,000 was the rent of the place, and there was the living expenses, food expenses. 30,000 per month you're burning. So all the royalties sort of went there during a year. And with 14,000 in the bank account, I started my journey without. I just did one thing. I wrote to around 300 odd companies that, hey, I'm a best-selling author. I'm traveling across India. I'll be writing a book. Would you like to sponsor me? And I'm from IT. So that too. And funnily, nobody responded. I still carried on with my journey. I was like 14,000 mein, I'll at least get away from my mother's constant banter. कि तुम्हारे दोस्त तुमसे senior हो गए होंगे. So I just left on a Garib Rath through Bhubaneswar, and I was like, Vizag tak jaunga and then I'll come back. And when I reached Bhubaneswar, I spent 3 days. Then I went to Peepli, which is a village. Then I went to Puri. When I was in Puri, I got a call from Alok Bajpai, who is the CEO of Ixigo.com. And Ixigo had just started 2 years ago, and it was quite sizable, but not at the current IPO Ixigo it is right now. It was still a very privately held 40 people employee, Series A raised company. They had just raised money from, I think, this Make My Trip at that time. And Alok Bajpai calls me, and I'm on the Puri beach, and it's very windy, and he's like, "Ki Harsh, I saw your proposal. This is something I wanted to do after college, but glad somebody from IT is doing this. I would love to help you." Uh, so I had in my proposal I had asked for 1 lakh rupees or 3 lakh rupees. So I'd love to give you that 1 lakh in exchange of wherever you go, you give us an address, we'll send you goodies, and you distribute it. So Ixigo ka tum distribution karo. And he was like, yeah, when do you need money? We'll send it next month. I'm like, I only have 3,000 rupees left in my bank account. And Alok is like, and he was really surprised. He first asked me, Alok asked me that, when do you plan to start your travel? He was thinking that I'll raise the money. And then I said, I'm already in it. I'm in Puri right now. It's my third day. And I have barely 4,000 left in my bank account because uh, I'd booked a couple of more journeys aage. And then he's like, then what will you do after you exhaust all that money? So I was thinking of going back home. Then he says, you don't have to go back home. Very next day, he was kind enough to send half of it. And he did not deduct TDS on it. He made it 1 lakh plus TDS they paid. So it was like I got 55,000 worth of money in it. So kind of him. And I think it's also, in a way, that universe worked in your favor if you think about it, that you really wanted to do that. And then after that time, I started writing all the times I would get away from travel. So I traveled in 5 legs. First travel was the entire coastline of India. So started from Dhanbad to Bhubaneswar, went all the way down to um, I think Coimbatore is where I went to Kerala with, because I had done Kanyakumari as a child. And it was really hot also. March, April, May is when I was going through. All these places were really hot. So I went through this entire stretch through Hyderabad. I mean, I was bifurcating, but mostly along the coastline, Chennai, Pondicherry, and all that. Ended my journey from Bombay to Surat to Ahmedabad, and then Ahmedabad to Delhi. So that was the first trip. Then I went back home. I began writing my Start of Failure book, the fourth book, and that book was published by Penguin, and they gave me 1 lakh rupees advance. So I had another 1 lakh, and then Alok's 1 lakh. So I had some money to sponsor my stay. And the good thing with being a best-selling author in India is that you have readers across everywhere. So I had the entire map of my travel was etched because some reader had volunteered on my Facebook when I put out the plan that I'm doing an India trip. Would you like to host me? So my entire map got mapped out because readers opted to host me in their home. So I had a reader hosting me in Indore, in Dibrugarh, in Tanjavur. So everywhere my book had reached, and most of these were IIT aspirants who picked up the book that I wanted to read about an IIT guy, love story, and all that. The sad part of it is also that the aspirational, but it's also weirdly funny.
Yeah.
And that was the first leg. The second leg, during that summer, I went to Ladakh on a bike, rented a bike, and went with a friend. And then that whole north, I came back via Srinagar. So the whole Delhi to Punjab, and then returning via Srinagar, Jammu, Pathankot, back to Delhi. The third was I cut India into half. So started from Calcutta all the way till Rajasthan. Okay, went to, and the fourth was northeast trip. But there, I think in Cherrapunji, I got very very sick, and I had to be flown back in. And it turned out I had a blood clot in my artery because of I have long legs and I'm a tall person. So I went from Shillong to Cherrapunji Guwahati to Shillong on a jeep, seated in the backmost seat with no leg space, and the dust. There was so much dust that my blood clot happened in my leg. It traveled all the way and it got entangled in my heart. So it became very. It was very. It was almost like a heart attack because you sort of get breathless because heart is pumping blood, but one artery is choked, so it's not able to go through. So I had to be rushed back in to Calcutta. I was in hospital for 7 days, and then my parents were like, "You're not going again." And I was on blood thinner for 6 months. So that happened at a 21-year-old, and they were also surprised. Nobody had seen somebody like that so young. Generally, it's a disease which happens to older people.
Hmm.
Blood thinning tablets they need because of cholesterol, etc. I was very fit. I was very mobile. So they were surprised, how did it happen? Then they realized they did not encounter anyone doing such a berserk way of pan India travel.
Did that scare
So
you
that
though, Harsh? Like, did that
not
incident?
really, not really, but I did all that was asked. I used to wear those, what do you call it? Those long socks that
Hmm.
there's a word for it, which sort of prevents blood from
Got it.
coagulating and all that.
Yeah.
And I was vegetarian for a year because I was advised only to eat green vegetable because they help produce RBC.
Yeah.
So that was a good time health wise. And yeah, and then post that, what happened was when you do so much of travel, the first thing that travel does to you, it makes you want to go back and study because now you
Hmm.
want to read more. And that's when the Young India Fellowship sort of happened. Went there, and I think Young India Fellowship sort of quenched my desire for good teachers because what Ashoka does really, really well, they don't only look at the credentials. You might be a PhD from Harvard, but if you're a bad teacher, they will not call you again. They'll
Hmm.
give you a first chance, but they take the student feedback really, really seriously. So we have seen that happen. Two to three professors during our course time were very verbose, and they were not. They sounded well, but they were faff.
Hmm.
They were faffing. So we gave that feedback. They were never called again. So that sort of becomes a very, very good. And Ashoka was also my experience that how an institution does not have a power dynamic between teacher and student. Because most of us were graduates somewhere, people who were coming after working for 4 or 5 years. I think my MBA colleges will be similar because people are young professionals, no more students. So you can chill with the professor, you can joke with the professor, you can have a banter with the professor, you can smoke and drink with professors. So that sort of broke down the boundaries between, and I realized how good that setting is when you have an instructor who is not inaccessible or who is not, I mean, you don't have to, I mean, out of courtesy, bow down to them.
Yep.
You, you can have a fun to and fro with them, banter with them.
Yep.
So I think in a lot of ways, point of view is also, I mean, I want to match that level of lectures. And we have been able to get that kind of very, very charming professors who are very, very accessible. All of the people, they spend at least an hour after the talk just lurking around with the instructor because that's the kind of culture. And the vibe is also very chilled out, you're drinking and listening to. So it sort of quenched my thirst Young India Fellowship. And I think because our batch was fully scholarship wala batch, I think 60% of us were full scholarship. So it had a lot of middle class people. So the tribe I had was people without loans. And I think that's a very, very important aspect of Young India Fellowship, which currently, I think my friend who is running the YF program is actively working towards making YF fully sponsored again. Because when you have a fully sponsored course, and that too a 1 year course, without a loan on your head, you are not looking for a conventional job. So my batch was to 2013-14, most of us on full scholarship. All of us ended up switching careers. Somebody came with a pharma background, B pharma, went into English literature. Somebody came with CA background, went into international relationships. I came with a writing and I wanted to be a journalist. I became an entrepreneur. It was only possible because all of us could choose not to take up a job for the sake of it, for the sake of paying a loan. We could wait to find something to our liking. So that really was, and I think post that, I think YF has become very costly as well. And I understand because they pay the lecturers really well. They also have the greatest infrastructure of all the university. I think nothing matches Ashoka. But I think when you have a loan, then it becomes like an MBA college. Everyone, no matter the whole point of studying liberal arts, sort of goes for a toss if everybody is sitting for a Paytm interview later on. So I think that freedom to switch careers, take a low paying job. I did not sit in the placement either at IIT or at Young India Fellowship because after IIT, I had my own startup. And and that freedom also came from, I think a lot of it was parental support. My parents have, and they have that inherent distaste for job. And also because I was making some money from royalties, so that was a cushion that I did not need to depend on my parents. And my parents were both working, so they didn't need money from me. So that's also privilege, which allowed me to do that. But post YF, there was no loan, and I really wanted to get into a journalism course, the journalism job. So I interviewed with Indian Express during that time. And during the whole course of the year I was traveling, I was also freelancing as a journalist for Hindu, wrote a couple of for Caravan as well. They all, I think my time as a full-time writer, I detest the most. When I look back, my biggest struggle days was that because when you are doing writing for money, I ended up treating every friend like a source. So if I'm meeting a friend, if I'm catching up with you, I'm like, koi naya insight pata chala gaya, koi scoop hai kya? So everything was like making my ends meet. So I started being very transactional with my friends, which my friends, or even I later on did not like. And secondly, I had to bargain for 500 rupees with the. I wrote an article called Pangs of Wasipur. It was the cover story of the Hindu. And I hail from Dhanbad. It was easy to. My mother's student was from Wasipur. So he showed me around. And a funny story happened that he showed me around on an Enfield. and I wrote that I changed his name but mentioned the Enfield, and apparently it turned out to be the only Enfield in Wasipur at that time. Everybody else had a Splendor or something else. He was slightly uh, rich from, uh, and he showed me around and he gave me a lot of trivia. I wrote all this, and then the goons reached his house, bet him up. This guy, poor guy, hapless guy, just because I dropped. It was a journalistic blunder that while I'm hiding the source, I'm giving away a very thing out,
Yeah.
yeah, out there. So that really taught me about journalism, but he also mentioned it to my mother that please ask Bhaiya to not come to Dhanbad for at least 1 year, because
Hmm.
these guys have noted down the name and they are noticing every train coming from Delhi if this name is there or not. So we were scared for 1 year. I didn't go back home. So that,
Wow.
and this became, I think Hindu reaches Dhanbad one day late. So that, and these guys probably don't read in English either. But this became famous because Anurag Kashyap retweeted it.
Hmm.
So I wrote this article. The Hindu paid me 3,500 for this, for which I traveled to Dhanbad on a 1,700 tickets to and fro. So 3,400 was my travel expenses.
Yeah.
I tried to ask Hindu to just pay me 500 rupees more. They said this is what they pay, and it was a 1,000 word article. So three.
Wow.
So that made me feel really horrible that I have to beg for 500 rupees from people
Yeah.
for doing something which took so much of my time and energy and money, and it's just covering my cost, not even giving anything for my effort. And
Yeah.
during this time, I remember seeing my junior start this company called InShots. It was called News InShots at that time, and it's
Yeah.
co-founded by Akbar, who is an IIT Delhi junior, and then Deepith was a friend. His co-founder is from IIT Kharagpur. And when I saw InShots, I was like, I'm so glad, because I want all these big print media to sort of die, because they pay their journalists so badly.
Hmm.
And it's not that the owners are not making enough. Owners are drawing crores of salaries. That just the journalists are being paid
Don't.
peanuts, and that's standardized. So I was like, technology will disrupt journalism. Technology will pay writers better. If this is what is going to happen, if newspapers' future is in shorts, then books' future is also an app. And that
Hmm.
sort of sent me into this dizzy. But YourQuote was not the first product I started with. I was too much passionate about location as a. I wanted to solve for real estate because I accidentally rented a house which had water issues, and it turned out all the three tenants before me left because of that. So I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, I will build TripAdvisor for real estate where people will write reviews so nobody has to go through anything like this again. And it was so, I think it was a great learning because it was such a bad idea. In terms of, that's where sometimes a lot of us think that this is a problem worth solving.
Yeah.
And when the first step we do, imagine अगर इतने सारे रिव्यू होंगे कितना अच्छा होगा. So you just jump on the 10th step without realizing how will you get to that
Yeah.
इतने सारे review.
Yeah.
And when I started building, I built the product and I started waiting for reviews to come in. Nobody wrote reviews.
Hmm.
It just kept on going. So it was quite sad. And then I pivoted to another app, and then sort of YourQuote happened because nothing else was working, and I went back to the original idea of WittyShit, that witty one-liners. But the domain, I when I quit WittyShit, I booked YourQuote, simply inspired from your story because Shraddha is a friend.
Hmm.
And she had started, I was helping her in the beginning with tech sparks in Delhi. It used to happen in IIT Delhi. So I would blog for her and make it trend on Twitter. So when I quit WittyShit, I booked yourcode.in 2012 and kept renewing it. And it was only in 2016 when I stopped.
But those first few startup failures, did they affect your? Because I remember the t-shirt company was one thing that was weighing on your mind, and then you
Yeah,
had this real estate adventure. A lot of people
yeah,
would give up in this sort of, and you were also, working full time as a writer at the same time. Or so, what gave you the
yeah.
courage to think that your quote would, go or lift
No,
off?
there was no courage, but I think it is innate distaste for working for somebody else.
Hmm.
And YourQuote was our last shot because we were totally out of money. Both Ashish and I, my co-founder, was my friend from IIT. So we were totally on the last bread and butter. And then I reached out to Pramath, who is the founder of Ashoka, that please incubate me in the campus. So they were supposed to start a entrepreneur in residence program later on, but they allowed us in 6 months earlier. So we were given free stay on campus,
Wow.
free, and 15,000 of stipend as well, which covered for our food from the mess. So it was like a 6 month of free stay at Ashoka in that 5-star campus, building series of apps, and then finally we built YourQuote. And
Wow.
YourQuote took off from day one because it's a viral product. If you write on YourQuote, you will want to share your content to the outside world. When you share, it has a watermark. It's like Prisma. And in fact, Prisma was our inspiration. The Prisma was turning pictures into artwork. We were like, we'll turn writing into our artwork. But Prisma was just as a tool because Instagram was already there. We also built a community on top of it. It was a social product. It was like Instagram for writers. And initially, people would start using YourQuote as a tool. And that's also a learning that if you're building a product, make it single user use case solve for that. If a user can use it as a tool for a really long time, and during that course of the process, they realize that they suddenly have 200 followers who are liking, then they become engaged with the followers and they start checking their posts as well. And suddenly it becomes a community. Another thing which we did with YourQuote, which was very, very fascinating, is that we started Facebook groups called YourQuote Family. And we had one rule. We realized that writers are the most narcissistic of all the people. They just want to promote their writing. I hate writers who you meet and then they're like, hey, this is what I wrote. Why don't you read it? I don't want to read it. I would read it if somebody other than you sends it to me. I don't trust you sending it to me. And the entire your quote was filled with, hey, check my quotes. Suddenly you will receive a notification that somebody commented on your post. And then you open and, hey, check my quote, like my quote. So we banned the word check my quote in the comment. You cannot write. So people then figured out a way C.H.E.C.K. check my quotes. Then we banned that also. So we used AI to filter out all those things. And then we realized that in YourQuote, when we were building a share feature, like a story feature, we realized if we give story, people will just keep posting their own post on the story because writers are narcissistic. So we disallowed, we didn't put the add to story feature in your own post. It's only on other posts. So you can only highlight others. You can never highlight yourself. And if you want to highlight yourself, you have to pay. So wherever you pay 2 rupees to highlight to your own followers, you pay 20 rupees to highlight to 100 odd different people who don't follow you. So it's like boost post. And that really, really worked because that created a gift economy inside your quote. I feature your quote. Now it's pay it forward. Somebody featured you, you are grateful. You go back and read their quotes, and then you feature them and you feature others. So that's how the community, from a product feature led way, it got built. Another innovation which is very subtle but very impactful, which we did at YourQuote, you write something, when you go to the design screen, your content comes with a signature of your name appended to the bottom. Very intentional, because if you're writing somebody's famous person's quotes, you're copying or plagiarizing, the very next page which has your own name in it deters you from proceeding because people, oh, it has to be my own. So your code has 99% original. It could be shitty original, but it's still written, typed by hand, content by people. So that's also a urban history documentation that we documented the last 10 years of a person's life. I have both the lockdowns of India. If tomorrow an anthropologist or even a sociologist wants to study what India was doing during the how India's emotional state was during the lockdown, YourQuote is the repository. So that's why when YourQuote struggled to raise funds because of TikTok, all the investors' sentiments shifted towards video platforms. We did not pivot to a video platform. We put up a brave front, we put up a transparent, honest front in front of our users that, hey, we are struggling, we don't have money, we need this money, 25,000 users to support the app for free, premium users. we managed to reach around 21,000, and which forced us to lock the app because we could not reach the optimum number because server cost was 12 lakhs a month. And 399 is what we sell our premium for, yearly premium. It's like 30, because the audience is such. We have a lot of shires using from smaller town. We can't charge 1,000 rupees.
Yeah.
They will not be able to afford. But even 399, only around 20,000 people managed to pay, whereas 500,000 people were using it every single day. So it slowly trickled down. Now it's a paid app with 30,000 odd daily active. Either you choose to watch an ad and open it, or you choose to pay the premium and open it. And it has slunk our rating down from 4.6 at its peak to 3.2 because people hate paid. But even now, the server cost is around 5 lakhs per month, which does not allow us to be full time, because if we start drawing salary, we'll not have enough money to pay the server cost. But we are very intent from a very, very cultural perspective to keep YourQuote alive forever, because we are documented. It's public history of India, basically.
Yeah. No, I
So we
agree,
have
Harshan.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like we have documented a person's journey from, if you see 2016 to now, if they have been a YourQuote user, you have seen them go through multiple breakups. You have seen them get married. Some get divorced. Some have babies. Some have second babies. Everything is sort of documented. Some have entirely put their lockdowns in it, their travel journeys in it, and so on. It's like that. So even now, YourQuote, the people who are buying premium are people who have 10,000 plus quotes in 10 years. So imagine 1,000 quotes per year. That's like 3 quotes a day, 3 posts a day. So that's the kind of frequency with which people write.
Yeah, and it's like an archive of their thinking over time,
Yeah.
which is very valuable to them. It's like a family photograph that you, like an album that you have that you don't want to lose. And like around this time, like you did not stop with YourQuote as a product. Your passion is also for building communities, Harsh. And this is something that, whether it's the silent reading movement, which I think CubbonReads was the home chapter of the entire global silent reading movement in a lot of ways. You and Shruti were the core sort of founding members and the founders of that. So something as simple as reading in public spaces, the idea of CubbonReads, why hasn't anyone thought of that before? And what was the story behind how CubbonReads was born? And why do you think it became such a big sort of global movement?
Yeah, I think to build anything original, you have to be critical by default. You cannot, if you are a person who gets impressed by other people, I don't think you can build anything original. I, by nature, am very, very critical about every single thing. My default reaction to the world is, this is bad. And then I put it on the other person or other thing to impress me. I always take that I am on a pedestal, basically, to the world. So that's how I approach the world, because if you're, for example, I hated Blogspot. I was a very active blog user, but I then realized that blogs did not build for mobile. When mobile smartphones took over, until 2013, I really enjoyed Blogspot WordPress. But then it comes to a point where I'm using my smartphone more than my laptop. And then I realized Blogspot, even now, it's not optimized for mobile. You cannot open dashboard of Blogspot and write a blog. And because mobile inherently is a visual medium, the screen itself is visual. So everything has to be communicated in pictures or videos. So it has to be visual. It cannot be plain text. So all the other writing platforms, they just focus on plain text, plain text, plain text. Twitter, because it was short, it managed to circumvent it. Short because they could enlarge the font size. Each tweet looks really big. So it's visual in its UI, it's visual. So I think Twitter was the only one which sort of did this. The second problem with blog was I used to share it on Facebook at that time, 2013. And nobody would click the link because people started consuming their content on Facebook. So what I started doing initially, I started 13 to 16, I posted all my content directly on Facebook. And then it was very bad for portfolio management. As a writer, I want to have all my writing at one place. But there is also one tweet about Barack Obama. There's also one tweet about Jan Lokpal movement in the middle. So it's not an album of my thoughts. It's also about links I'm sharing. So Facebook became multimedia. And then Instagram came in, but it did not have a writing tool. And even now it has a create tool, but it does not allow me to copy text. So if I write something on story, I'll have to rewrite it or use ChatGPT that extract that text. Or if you are an iPhone user, you have that feature. But it's so complicated. YourQuote from day one, I was like, copy text is going to be my game changer. Edit text also. So all the YourQuote, the wallpaper is provided by us. Mostly, sometimes people upload, but people's text is what we save at the back end. So tomorrow, if all the wallpapers get deleted, right now we are optimizing server costs by deleting a bunch of quotes of all the users who have not logged in last 2 years. If you are a dead user, but it does not delete your code because the text file is still with us. But that image that you have created is 250 KB, and there are 200 million of these. So 100 million, if I delete 100 million odd posts of deactivated users who have not logged in, I still can recover your code because your text is there. You'll have to again choose a wallpaper.
Your server costs go down, right, in the long term.
So that 5 lakh can be brought down to at least 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs. So that's what right now we are working on YourQuote to optimize the cost. And it's a beast because you're basically playing with people's content. So basically, you send out a mail, like Facebook also starts sending all your live videos will be archived or deleted because it's huge file. It's costing Facebook so much money for no reason. So they are also optimizing. So it is understandable. We were talking about something.
But about CubbonReads, Harsh, I think now with Point of View you are going down the monetizing path, but CubbonReads in a lot of ways is still a community-led, sort of not. I mean, it's not for profit, and it's largely led by the people that attend it. And without meeting you for a year, I had moved back to India recently, and I did not have any other third space to go to as an adult to meet other people in a city like Bombay. And that's when I found a space called Juhu Reads. And I just walked in, and it was one of the only spaces where I felt like I didn't have to explain anything. I could just come and be who I wanted to be. So I felt like it was such an important public space for a young adult because a lot of people don't talk about it, but it's very hard for adults to make friends because we don't meet people consistently outside work too, right? So this idea of CubbonReads, not only what happened with CubbonReads, but how did you expand it to other cities, and why did and what were the challenges?
Did it work? How did it start? I think I just digress in the previous question only. The simple reason is I began with CubbonReads started because I completely detest book clubs. I think book clubs are just a way for the curators to feel good about themselves. That's all there is. Because book is a very, very personal experience. I don't want to know, even if you tell, I cannot do anything about it. If you tell you read, say, you read a book called Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, you felt good. Okay, I don't understand what's this obsession of people to know what did people think about it, because I have, and I'll tell you the story of a book club I was a part of. I have just attended one session of book club. The book was Kamala Das's autobiography we had to read. And it's a brilliant book, but I read it by spending a sleepless night in pressure because next day the book club meeting is going to ask me questions about it. And next day I blurted out, I vomited whatever I had read and opined. But today I don't remember anything about the book. The only book I remember is a book which I picked by my own choice. I read it at my own pace, not because there was a to-do list of 10, 20 books a year or 50 books a year. Like Kafka's Metamorphosis, if somebody says they finish in one go, I sort of judge them because it's like wine. You cannot really sip it. If you're dunking it in one go, you're not getting it. Because
it's not a race, right?
yeah, every page is unsettling.
Yeah.
You have to live with that unsettlement. You have to have that hangover bother you for good 1 week or 2 weeks, in your own ways. Outsider by Camus does the same. I think every Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes does the same.
It's a
Levels
beautiful
of Life
book.
by Julian Barnes does the same. It makes you rethink about memory. It makes you rethink about relationships. And whatever my journey with the book is very personal. It reminds me of my father and my personal core memory.
Yeah.
I can share, of course, but if you listen to it, it can warm your heart. But it's not intellectually stimulating, which book clubs make it about. It's not
Mm.
it's emotionally touching. That's what a
Mm.
book discussion essentially is.
Sure.
Oh, kitna. But
Yeah.
I don't remember that one week later.
Yeah.
And second point of a book club is book club makes it about that the most articulate in the group.
Yeah. The most
And what
extroverted who can speak the
extrovert,
loudest. Yeah.
loudest and most uh, articulate as well. So
Yeah.
what it ends up doing, it's whitewashing of your experience with the book because they articulated it better. You
Mm.
might have articulated it over a period of 8 days, 20 days. You would have arrived at. So whenever somebody discusses a book that I am reading or intending to read, I distance myself from that discussion simply because that's a spoiler for me. Like
Yeah.
I hate the fact that I watched Dumbledore in a movie before I read the book. Because when I now see Dumbledore in Harry Potter, I imagine that face. So it stripped me of my imagination.
Mm.
Movies does that to you.
Yeah.
So if there is a movie and a book, I would anyway prefer to read the book first before the movie.
Yeah.
The only places where, very rare places, I think Forrest Gump is the only movies which is better than the book. I think
Mm.
Into the Wild is also, I think book is as good, but the movie is better, I think, because book is very journalistic in nature, reportage. Book is, the movie is more like a memoir,
Yeah.
which is, which has a personal element to it, which
Yeah. And
book also does, but it's a third person.
a beautiful music too. The Eddie Vedder
Yeah,
track.
Eddie
That's
Vedder,
amazing.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
That was
brilliant.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was where I came from, and I think when Shruti and I started going to Cubbon as well, we would read our own books. We'd never discuss. I think there's a beautiful talk by Zakir Hussain, Ustad Zakir Hussain, late Ustad Zakir Hussain at Google. He is giving a talk, and he talks about this thing called what happens in the green room. Do you think we are discussing कि this is the rag, this is the tal which we are going to play? No, we are talking about भाभी जी कैसी हैं, बच्चे कैसे हैं, आज खाना में क्या खाएंगे, दही बड़ा होगा कि नहीं. And then I take that experience to the stage. And then Shiv Kumar Sharma, again, late Doyen, he's playing Santur, he's asking me, dahi vada chalega? And I'm on my tabla, I'm saying, dahi vada nahi to dosa kha lenge. So
Yeah.
this is a conversation that, so when maestros are not intellectualizing their music, who are we as amateur readers
Mm.
to make such a hullabaloo about a book and the essence of it and the quintessence of it? I don't want to know. If you're a reader, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
No need to flaunt it. I hate all these. This year I read 70 books. I mean, I read one book and I went back to that same book 3 times, 4 times because it was such a difficult. God of Small Things. When I first read it, I couldn't understand a thing.
Yeah.
I read it again at 27. I understood, but I did not fully. I went back again at 31. So that way, I'm a very bad reader. But every single time the book gives me another thing. It's like a
For sure.
forest you're getting lost in, and every time you're finding some other uh, quaint plant that you're taking home with you. So a good book is like that. You cannot really quantify its essence or its lessons. And I think this is also where all these people, especially I think I blame it on the science, not purest science. Purest science still get it. I think I blame it on the I hate engineers. I'm an engineer. I hate engineers. I have no engineering, but a typical tech bro friend. I can't stand them. And the reason for that is engineering colleges is so optimized towards job. People don't go to IIT for studying physics or maths or chemistry. They go
Yeah.
to IIT to have a job, to placement के लिए जाते हैं, package के लिए जाते हैं. it's so embedded कि कितना पैकेज लगा. मतलब आईटी से निकल के ये नहीं पूछता है कि डिग्री कौन सी है. थैंक यू फॉर आस्किंग डिग्री rather than you asked me कि what did you
Yeah,
study in.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
rather
that's
than कि कितना पैकेज लगा. मैं तो बैठा ही नहीं प्लेसमेंट में. The
yeah.
point is this utilitarian culture of engineers, when it translates to hobbies, everything, every finer thing in life goes for a toss.
Hmm. So
They will never.
you're saying it becomes like a product or like a way to
Yeah,
optimize rather than actually
yeah. I
engage,
have a
right?
friend who was a brilliant actor in my college IIT. He is a consultant now. I recently spoke to him कि why don't you get back to theater? You're so good. You would arrest us from beginning to the end. And he's like, अरे वो तो जॉब की resume के लिए किया था, वहाँ पे आ गया तो जॉब लग गई. And उसके बाद I never felt like talking to him again because it's pulling my, I think my creativity down because
For sure,
it's
yeah.
so de-spiriting to hear something like
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
I think, and engineers do, if you notice tech bro hobbies, it will be fitness because there is a logical outcome to it. Reading
Hmm.
fiction, very few, the only those who can potentially appreciate finer things. And that's why Bookmark is such a dear project for me because I understand that people who love finer things in life, like I love watching birds. There is no ROI at all with it, watching birds other than pure enchantment at discovering a sound which is new and a bird which is new, or even a sound which is old and then seeing and verifying that it's the same bird. It's a hawk cuckoo,
Hmm.
it's a flycatcher. That I sleep now, I have so much peace knowing that it's a black kite which is whistling, or it's a not whistling, trilling, or it's an scops owl which is just doing beep beep in the night. So that peace and joy that I'm not alone. I now walk looking up. So it just made me a more appreciative of nature in a way. So I don't think any tech bro will be able to appreciate birding. They will be like, what the fuck? Why would you look at birds? And it's again, I think you lack nuance in your life. You lack that value for subtle things. You are too utilitarian. And I think a lot of it also culminates into being politically in a certain spectrum because that spectrum is very, very, I will not take the name, but yeah, that spectrum is very black and white. And I think science is also very black and white because either it exists or not, does not exist. But arts, everything is gray. And that's why a dip in the arts is very, very important. Then you would realize that everyone is fallible. Yeah. I think I don't build for other people. I don't write for other people. I don't build for other people, either community or product. I just build for myself because I feel that I have a good taste in things. And I know there are people like me. So if I truly solve anything for myself, it will end up appealing to a bunch of those similar vibe people. So CubbonReads, I think Shruti and I both did not want it to become what it has become. In fact, when on days when there are less people, we feel happier because we read more. There are less people to photograph as curators. There are less people to interact. So whenever a chapter curator reaches out to us that I've been getting only 1 or 5 people, I'm like, you're blessed. It's when you do the reading, I think that's the core intent. You started out to read in the park. And we have also received very, very fun and very innocent messages like, hey, somebody started another chapter around 100 meters from me. It's in the same locality. Why did you guys allow that? And I'm like, what's your intent? Are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it for making people read? What's your intent? Because if you truly want people to read and get back to reading, then I think you will be happy about it. I mean, we are the ones who started Lalbagh, initiated all the sub Bangalore chapters because we wanted everyone to, and there was no monetary incentive. Even now with CubbonReads, we have not even use CubbonReads to market bookmark or ourselves or point of view. Nobody knows who is behind CubbonReads until you read it in the press. So, but so that's how, and it. I think in retrospect, when I think about CubbonReads, I also realize that it's so important for the city because everything else in the city is commercialized, including point of view. Uh, everything else is commercialized. But I think point of view, we are charging for curation because we, again, we have the taste. We'll get you the best people. We'll not settle for anyone who is not good enough. And it is also allowing us to pay the lecturers well. But in CubbonReads, it was the only space. The idea itself is doing it in a public space, which is free. So there was not even a single ounce of motivation to monetize it. Because the moment you monetize it, you have to move out of the space. How can you monetize a public park? The access is park. So our difference was with the administration, which sort of doesn't get it. I mean, they are running a public park, but they are so anti-public in all the respects, in terms of policing, in terms of they have problems with the way we sit, they have problems with sitting on the grass, um, irrelevant, illogical problems, unscientific problems. We wrote an article for the caravan tax while we were struggling with getting BBMP parks in Bangalore to open up for readers. Yelahanka is a place which has great parks, but they don't allow sitting on the grass. And their logic was grass gets spoiled. First, even if it gets spoiled, who are you serving for? Are you building a park for grass or are you building a park for people? Second, if it does not get spoiled, we spoke with horticulturists, and these guys told us that the only way to damage grass is daily foot traffic of 7 to 8 hours. We are weekly, once a week, and 2 hours, 3 hours max. And that too, it's not foot traffic. You're not running, you're not playing football on it. You're not running, it's not a pitch, which because of people walking over and over at the same part, it sort of makes into a puck dundee or sorts. So, yeah, so illogical. I think that it's simply from a place of deep mistrust for young people with which the administration operates. They did not care if we spoke their language or not. They thought we were people who were doing things like drugs and other things in the park, where we were just sitting in the book. I remember during the Secret Santa incident, they took books, they unveiled it, trying to find pudiyas of what no God knows, and they only found words, and so disappointed they were that it was only words there. So I think all these communities come from a deep place of reclaiming public spaces and reclaiming it for an intellectual purpose, but not intellectualizing the activity. That's also even in point of view, it's the only intellectual in the room is the lecturer in the truest sense, because they are the ones you have to listen to. You are definitely asking, but and you are making your point, but it's also a space much like all the reads chapter where you can come silently read and leave without having to speak, without having to interact. In this very same DNA, point of view also has that DNA. There's so many people who come just to attend the lecture. They don't have questions to ask. They might listen in on what others are asking, and when we are doing the group photo, they don't come for the group photo, they just leave. And I love that. There's no mandate. You can just come for the lecture and go. I was that student. I was too shy and fearful to ask questions, but I intently listened to all my lecturers. So it did not affect my learning in any way. It was so that space that allows you to not talk, to not socialize, is missing in the current sense of community. And I think if we are building chapters, you are running YourQuote or Point of View Bombay, we have to preserve that silence bit. I think CubbonReads work because of silence. Even Point of View works because it's the only non-workshopish intellectual activity and when it is not workshopish, so it means you can be passive. You don't have to be, it's not like a pottery class where you have to use, even that is very pleasurable, but you might do it once a month. You might not do it once. But lectures you can attend every week because you have this core memory of attending lectures every day. So it's nostalgic. Like CubbonReads says, I have a core memory of sitting in my grandfather's garden and reading. So it's nostalgic, it's chill, there is no rule. You can interject the lecturer in the middle and ask questions. You can walk up and get a drink while the lecture is on. And you don't have to socialize. There's no mandated socialization. We do a mixer, but it's an optional mixer. So that way, it's very, very freeing as a community. I can be an anonymous presence in that community if I want to. Same for CubbonReads. The fact that it does not mandate you to talk. You feel like talking post the reading session. So that's what really I think is my passion. And I think I build things for myself which appeal to my mind. And I think if it appeals to my mind, I know there will be people like me and there will be millions and millions of, I mean, 7 million of those are on YourQuote. Yeah. So I think everything is somehow seeped into nostalgia for me. Lectures reminds me of college. Reading in a park reminds me of my grandma's place. There's a garden where we sit and read and do things. And cars, as my grandfather had an old Fiat. That time it was new, and it passed away with him in 2002. So when he died, his corpse was taken to the his hometown, and then my mama sold it off, and the memory sort of died there. So when I came to Bangalore, I came from Delhi, and Delhi. The best part about Delhi is every nook and corner you see an old monument. The one thing that I really missed about Bangalore is the lack of there are historic places, but it's relatively new. It's not really old. And in general areas like in Indranagar, etc., you don't in popular areas you don't see many old things. So for me, I found my monuments in these old cars, and Bangalore is such a great place for all. I think Bombay also and Calcutta also. There's a subculture of old car keepers, restorers. So Indranagar has a lot of old Fiats, Contessas, etc. And when Shruti and I started walking in Indranagar, we started capturing those. And then one day I was just like, why not make a page? Because if I'm capturing the same thing, I'm doing it for myself. But I'm like, if I'm seeing it, so many other people also will see. They might not have a platform for sharing it. Why not build it? So we made a page called Pretty Old Cars. And now it's a huge community. Well, not huge, it's 2,000 followers. But all of them keep sending me. So I have cars, I featured cars from Cuba, Uzbekistan, Japan, US, of course, Mexico, and Peru. So it's a worldwide contribution. We have featured some around 500 odd old cars. And still, I have three more that I got today, which I have to feature. So it's something that just, I feel like I've created a map of old cars across the world. So now people message me, hey, I'm in Delhi. Where did you post this old car? So I send them the location and so on. So that sort of, we also ask the location of the car when they spot it. So if it is not a moving car, especially if it is a defunct car, so we can actually go and walk up to. So I do plan to host a old car walk in Bangalore someday, where I just take people around Indranagar to show them 8 old cars. And I'm not a car geek, I'm an urban history geek. So I don't know much about those cars, engine, etc. But I'm really curious that someday, somebody must have parked it there, hoping to take it out the next day. And by some twist of fate, they never took it out. So I'm very curious what happened that day. So it's like an investigative journalistic project as well, and also an urban history project. So yeah, it's a tiny community we run. And yeah, I think next year there's a plan for Shruti to open her bakery. She's excited about that. We will, yeah, we'll open a bakery together. Yeah, it's all her thing. Thank you. Thank you so much.